So far, Perek Gimel, chapter 13. A little recap, especially since we skipped a week last week. It was nice last week. I know you were here.
Yeah, very
Nice. So we're talking about the Beinoni. And the fact that before a neshama comes down over here to this world, so mashbi and oisai, the neshama is administered an oath, and it's a two-part oath. Again, the first part of the oath, Tehi Tzadik V'al Tehi Rasha, will address Mitzvah Hashem in chapter 14, which is the next chapter. But the second part of the shvur, the second part of the oath is Afilu Kol Ha'ilm Kuli Eim L'cha Tzadikata Hayeh B'necha Kirasha, that even if the entire world insists that you're a tzaddik, you should view yourself kir rasha, like a rasha, which the Alter Rebbe explains that kir rasha means a beinoni, meaning never consider yourself to be a perfect person who has graduated beyond the struggles of life, unless you have solid evidence, unless you have a gili malamayla, you're informed so from heaven, or you have absolute evidence in general. We should always understand our place in this world and our position in this world, and that is our job to struggle, and therefore we should never be complacent. And that's why tzaddikim can get away with things that most of us can't. They say one of the holy tzaddikim, I believe it was a Talmud of Mezritcher Magid, his name was Rav Moshe Leib Misasev. And he had a derech that he would go in town, he would visit at nights, he would visit the areas where the people were playing cards. The Yidden who were on the lowest level, the absolute, what we call today OTD in a big way. And they would be playing gambling and drinking, and he would go and hang out with them and be mekarev a lot of them back to Yiddishkeit. But to do that, he would actually go down and spend time over there. But obviously, this is a derech which I can't do that, and you can't do that. Because this is the whole idea of afilu kol ha'ilm kulei eim l'cha tzadikata hayeh b'necha kirash. You have to realize I have a nefesh habahamis, and I'm still struggling with my own desires, my own nefesh, my own evil, my own klipa, and therefore I can never put myself in the position of a nesayim. The Gemara tells us similar stories. The Gemara says that in Ksubis, the Rabbi Acha, the whole sugya in Gemara in Ksubis, the beginning of the first Perek, whole sugya about how the different Amiroim, what they would do to be Mesameach, the Chassan and the Kala. Specifically the Kala. Ketzad Meraktin Lifnei HaKala, it's from that Gemara. So the Gemara says that Rabbi Acha would take the Kala on his shoulders and dance with her. So his students asked him, Rabbi, can we do the same thing?
No.
So he answered them, Idamya alaychu kikeshura. If she feels to you like a beam, like a beam of wood, like a shtickle holz, then you can do it also. And so another Gemara talks about Rav Gidl, that he used to stand outside of the women's mikveh, and so he was there to answer shilos. When women come, he tell him, this is how you're supposed to table, and this is how you're not supposed to table. And the Talmidim asked him the same thing, aren't you worried about the Yetzer Hara? And he said it's a similar answer. He says to me, that's big tzaddikim. In a similar sense, in our generation, so the Rebbe, whenever people would write the Rebbe and ask the Rebbe, what's the Rebbe's opinion on going to college, to university? And the Rebbe was very, very against, and the Rebbe expressed his opinion many times, and there's actually a whole sikha in Likutei Sichos, which is usually they would write up the Rebbe's sichos, and the people who would write up the sichos, and then they would give it into the Rebbe, and the Rebbe would do his edits. Very rare would the Rebbe add in whole long things in his own handwriting. But there's a sikha in Likutei Sichos, Chilek Tezayin. It's all about Chachmas Chitzonius, about secular studies. And when they gave it to the Rebbe added a whole piece about college. whole piece about not going to college. Important is not going to college and how it's a spiritual hazard and how dangerous it is. However, we all know that Rabbi himself went to college. Rabbi himself studied in college for several years in Berlin and then in France. So is this being hypocritical? So then you have to ask, was Rabbi being hypocritical when he said that his students couldn't do it? In other words, there's certain things. We also talked about this a little at the end of Perek Zayin, about the Rambam and the Ramban, that the Alter Rebbe points out that they were able to learn secular studies and do it totally l'shem shamayim kikardum lachtuch. Not even kardum lachtuch, but they did it in order to increase their understanding of Hashem and of Torah also. So it's very important for us to realize that there are certain situations in life that are dangerous and that we have to stay away from them. And even if we think, I have the ability, I have the power, I have the koyach, so we say every single day in davening, Al Tivyenu L'Dei Nisayin, we ask Hashem not to give us a Nisayin, and we definitely don't personally ourselves put ourselves into such a place of Nisayin. And that's perhaps one of the big messages over here that Alter Rebbe is saying in this chapter, is that there are those who struggle and then there's tzaddikim, those who don't struggle. And it's very important for those of us who are still strugglers to remember, I am a struggler, and therefore I always have to be careful with what I do, because I still have those desires within me, they have not gone away. And with that, we'll continue on the same, and we're going to continue pretty much on the same theme. Again, page 36, 4 lines from the top, where it says, Va'af misha b'seiras Hashem chavtzei. Until now, we were talking about a Beinoni who is a businessman. So a person who's a businessman obviously has more nisyonos, has more temptations than a person who is what you call a yoshev vayol, a person who sits and learns Torah all day. And that's for 2 reasons. Reason number 1 is obvious. There's more interactions with the outside world. But there's another reason. And that is that the ultimate antidote to temptations and these kind of thoughts is learning Torah. In fact, the Rambam, in the end of Hilchos Yisurei Bia, the Rambam says, what is a person supposed to do when he's hit with thoughts and inappropriate thoughts and different temptations? So the Rambam says the best thing to do is turn your thoughts to something else, and the very best is to turn your thoughts, start thinking about Torah. Torah is the ultimate, I can't say vaccine because it doesn't eradicate it completely, but it's the old, right. Whereas the Gemara says in Kiddushin, in the same place over there, that Nasati l'chas Yetzer Hara, and then Nasati l'chas Torah Tavlin, right? That the Torah is what takes care of the Yetzer Hara. So the person who's learning Torah, it's a double whammy. First of all, it doesn't have those same interactions and temptations that face people who have to go out into the workforce. And second of all, he's occupied in studying Torah, and his mind is preoccupied with it, and therefore, to a certain extent, the mind is full, and there is no place for all these shtusim. So that's what we're going to talk about now. We're going to talk about a higher level of Beinoni, the Beinoni who's busy and sitting learning Torah the whole day. Also someone, not only he sits and learns Torah the whole day, but that's his desire. He desires to study Torah the whole day. He desires to study Torah. And he deliberates and contemplates Torah yemon v'layla, day and night, lishma. Not only does he love Torah, not only does he learn Torah, but it's lishma. So such a person, it's very possible that by him the nefesh habahamis and the Yetzer Hara will be barely perceptible. But still, says the Alter Rebbe, ein zu hechacha klal. This is no proof shenitcha ramim koimei, that the evil within has really been pushed away and out of its place. Rather, it's possible that the essence of the nefesh habahamis is full strength in its place b'chol hasmali, in the left ventricle of the heart. And Stam, it's just interesting if you note. Thank you very much. If you look at the top line of this very perek, this is talking about, again, the Beinoni over there, who's the businessman. So there it says, if you look at the last words of the previous page, Aliyah be'enav, kilu muhusei v'asmusi shalara, he should view himself and understand that the essence of the Rahu B'takvi of Gurase is full force and full strength. B'chol Asmali, in the left side of the heart, Kituldase, as it was when he was born. So you have almost the exact same lines over here, but there's one word that's missing. Here it says, if you look 5-6 lines later, Mahuse Vatsmusehu B'takvi of Gurase, and the Alter Rebbe adds in one word, Bimkoimoi. You notice we don't have that earlier, that word Bimkoimoi. Because by the businessman, it's not only in the left side of the heart. That person's actually affected and is very aware of the different temptations that then go to the person's mind. But here, because this is a person who's studying Torah the whole day, he doesn't really sense the Nefesh Bahamis. After Rebbe is saying that's true, but in its place in the heart, it's still there. You might not feel it, but it's still there. It's still there in its place. Rak only shalavushav, that the three lavushim of the Nefesh Bahamis shehem. Machshava dibur ma'aseh shel Nefesh Bahamis, the thought, speech, and action of the Nefesh Bahamis, einon mislapshim b'moyach, they do not manifest themselves in the mind, v'hapeh, and in the mouth, v'hiyadayim, and the hands, v'shar evri aguf, and the other limbs of the body, mibnei Hashem, shenasan shliton mishal l'moyach alalev, because Hashem gave domination to the mind over the heart. And therefore nefesh elokish b'moyach, the nefesh elokis, which is in the mind, meishelas rules be'ir haktana, in the small city, which is evri aguf kulam, all the limbs of the body. Because the mind dominates over the heart, so therefore in this person, the nefesh elokis, which is in the mind, taka rules over the body to make sure that all the limbs of the body should only be levushim and merkavatu, should only be vehicles for the three levushim of the nefesh elokis, she slapshu behan, that only they should enter all the limbs. Shehem, what are the three garments of the nefesh elokis? They are machshava dibur ma'aseh shel tayag mitzvah Torah, thought, speech, and action of the 613 mitzvahs of the Torah. Aval, however, the essence of the nefesh elokis, when we're talking about the beinoni, the strugglers, the essence of the nefesh elokis, meaning the mind, the intellect, and the emotions of the nefesh elokis do not have domination over the essence of the nefesh bahamis. The only time when there's domination is during those times when the love for Hashem is revealed in the heart, and that is in specific times, for example, such as during davening or in similar occasions. And even when the beinoni is davening, it is only control and domination. As the pasuk says, that one nation will strengthen itself and overpower over the other, which, as Rashi says over there, comes at noifel, when one rises, the other falls. So therefore, during davening, when the other rises, the other falls. During davening, when the nefesh elokis rises, the nefesh bahamis falls. So nefesh elokis during davening, the nefesh elokis misametzes and miskaberes al nefesh bahamis, it strengthens itself and overpowers the nefesh bahamis. The makar hagvuris, through the source of all strength, shehi bina. The source of all strength is bina, the capacity of understanding. The nefesh elokis uses its bina. Lisboinen b'gdulas Hashem ein soif baruchu. It meditates in the greatness of Hashem, and through that to give birth to ahava azal Hashem, to a powerful love for Hashem, kirish be'esh, a fiery love, b'chal yimani shebelibay, in the right side of the heart. And then during davening is kaf yiseter achra, shebechal lasmali. So then the klipa, which in the left side of the heart, is suppressed. But it's not. It hasn't gone away, and it hasn't. Not only it hasn't gone away. It hasn't been eliminated. It hasn't been nisbatel. Nisbatel means it hasn't been completely overpowered to the point of dilution, that it loses all effect. Ella b'tzadik. Only by a tzaddik is the nefesh bahamis completely nisbatel. It's completely gone. Not only, in other words, the difference between, as we'll see soon, between a beinoni when he's davening, which by beinoni when he's davening also, his heart is filled with love for Hashem, and the nefesh bahamis is incapacitated. But the example that the Rebbe is going to use soon is that during davening, the nefesh bahamis by the beinoni, it's like it's asleep. It means it's asleep. It's going to wake up soon. It hasn't been delivered a knockout blow. It's like it's right now. due to the love of the nefesh elokis, it takes a back seat, it goes to sleep, but it's going to wake up after davening. Ela b'tzadik, only by a tzaddik. 1 second, only by a tzaddik is the nefesh habahamis completely incapacitated. Shenamar boy, because by the tzaddik it says, "V'libi chalal b'kirbei." My heart is empty within me. In other words, I have no passions, devoid of desires and passions. V'moyis b'ra, the tzaddik is someone who absolutely detests anything that's evil. V'soynei b'tachlas asina, and despises it completely. V'hamius, and is repulsed by it. Or maybe if you're talking about a level of a tzaddik she'eni gomer, he also despises evil, but perhaps not to the ultimate degree, kenal, as mentioned earlier. Yeah.
Is there anything in our tefillah or in Chabad that expresses the nefesh elokis domination of the nefesh bahamas during tefillah, so that a person can while he's davening can express what's going on? Or it's happening anyway, but the davening doesn't refer to
it. There we have the love. That's the culmination of davening. The point of all davening is the v'ahavta. I think we've spoken about this before, and the davening is called avodah shebelev.
So when you say Shema, you should have in mind this yesod that we're learning tonight, and it will help your davening. It will.
Yeah, but Shema, you can have it in mind already beforehand. Shema is the apex. That's the climax of everything. But yeah, in other places in Chassidus it talks about how the whole Birchas Krishma. We might have even discussed this before. That's all the desire to give this knockout punch to the nefesh bahamis. It knocks it out temporarily. And even to get the nefesh bahamis somewhat on board also, with the love of Hashem. But again, it's only temporary. It's only for that moment, and definitely that's something to contemplate during davening. So a tzaddik is someone who completely again incapacitates the nefesh bahamis. It's either completely gone, or it's been overpowered to the point that it's completely powerless. But by people who struggle. During davening, the nefesh bahamis is like a person who's sleeping. And it could wake up. The same thing, by those people who struggle. So the nefesh bahamis who kiyashin, when the person is davening and krishma and davening, so then the nefesh bahamis is asleep in the left side of the heart.
How come it doesn't mention Torah learning?
Shalibe boyer ba'avas Hashem, because one's heart is burning with a love for Hashem. But afterwards, it can awaken, and as we know, that's actually what happens very often. Nefesh bahamis awakens after davening. Why doesn't it mention Torah study?
Yeah.
Because
don't just mention Tefillah, Krishna, Tefillah. I thought it was an antidote.
It
just mentions that Talmud Torah is a top.
You're talking about Shema. So the pasuk says, "V'yahaftas Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha b'chol nafshecha b'chol meidecha." And the next pasuk is already starts talking about Torah. V'hayu advarim ha'ela sharnechim b'tzavcha hayom al levavecha. So what's the connection? One pasuk talks about love for Hashem, and the next pasuk turns right away and talks about limud Torah. So the Sifri says, and it's brought down also in the Rashi, that a person is going to ask, how am I supposed to come to love this unknowable and infinite Hashem? So when you study Torah, you come to love Hashem. So there's no question that there is a connection between limud HaTorah
and love of Hashem.
And love of Hashem. And the more we learn Torah, the more we understand about Hashem, the more we come to love Hashem. At the same time, it's more of you might want to say, a long-term consequence. The more I learn Torah, the more I come to love Hashem. When a person's actually studying Torah, a person's actually sitting down with a Gemara and learning Machlef Para, Para B'Chamer, or Sher Shanaga Chasapara, or Shnayim Meichen Batalis. So your mind is preoccupied with what you are learning about. And if there is a love for Hashem being developed at this moment, that's more of something hidden, and that's more that impacts your general view of Hashem and your general appreciation for Hashem. But it's difficult to say that a person is sitting down, learning with a Gemara and learning a Perek in Masechtas Chulin, And while he's learning it, it's causing his heart to be aflame with love for Hashem. I'm sure by tzaddik and gemurim that's the way it is. But by the rest of us, we're focused on the logic and the intellect and the arguments and the svaris of the Gemara. And davening is different. At the end of the day, it's mentioned. Davening is called Avodah Shebelev. Davening is not just something about long term it's supposed to bring you to love. The essence of davening is love of Hashem. Davening is Avodah Shebelev, and as the Zohar says, less pulchana de rechimusa. There's no service of Hashem like the service of love. And during davening, we're actively working to awaken our love to Hashem. And you can't say that when you're sitting down with a chveisa, with a gemara or a poiskim or shulchan aruch, that you're actively endeavoring at this moment to awaken your love for Hashem. It's a different, and that's why there's davening and there's learning, and each one serves a different purpose. And again, I'm not saying that there is no connection between limud Torah and love, because as I mentioned earlier, there is that connection. But I think that's more of a long-term process. The more I understand about Hashem, the more I appreciate Him. So in the larger picture, I learn to love Him more. But that's not a function of what's happening in a very revealed and active way while I'm sitting and learning Torah, as opposed to davening.
It's still called Torah Tavlin. It's still an antidote to the Yetzer Hara.
Yes, but that
should do
because
the
it's
same thing as is being prescribed.
It's different.
So,
Torah, and I'll get to you in a second. Torah is a tavlin to the Yetzer Hara. First of all, you could talk about in the long term again, in the long term effects of what Torah is. That's number one. Number two, when you're sitting and learning Torah, so when you're sitting and learning, you're practically speaking, your mind is occupied.
no time to entertain the Yetzer Hara. I mean,
what does it say about Chanukah? That when the pit is empty and there is no water in it, so automatically what comes in. So when your mind is full, there is no place for shtusim, especially when your mind is filled with Torah, which Torah is kedusha. That's the Hashem's chachma. But it's not necessarily because at this moment I'm filled with love with Hashem, but it's because my mind is filled with Hashem's chachma. Yes.
The C.S. Shon says in his Agama that it's a famous Agama that people are busy with lumdis. I don't know if I'm saying it correctly, with the Torah, lumdim, and when you talk to them about Yiras Hashem and Avos Hashem, das ist für die Poshete Jeden. Das können nicht verstehen a Blatt Gemara. It's a famous.
Okay, they translate because I'm not. If everyone here understands English, right?
Which knocks us all. Yiras Hashem, Ahavas Hashem. This is a maktubon for special Yidden. But those who understand Gemara and Ksois, Rambam, and Rishbaz, and Arat, they don't need that. They get everything from this. And he says that's a mistake because you think that you get everything from the Rishonim and Achonim, and you don't put your attention to the topic of Ahavas Hashem, Yiras Hashem.
Absolutely. I think on a previous
Are you referring to that?
I'm referring. No, not really. I mean, what you're saying is 100% true, but I wasn't referring to that at this moment. But it's possible to learn. Listen, there's also the famous Bach and Simon Mem Zayin by Birchas HaTorah Alma of the Haaretz Al Shalei Berchu B'Torah Tchila. The Bach also speaks very strongly over there about the possibility that you can learn Torah and forget about the noise in the Torah. You can learn Torah and forget about the giver of the Torah. And how important it is always to be conscious.
Actually,
right.
The famous thing, Lama of the Order.
Right, that's what the Bach talks about. Yeah, but right now we're talking. The bottom line is, davening is the place where the love is. That is the essence of what davening is. Can love also be a byproduct of learning Torah? Most definitely. But you wouldn't say why you're learning. What's learning Torah is about sitting down and loving Hashem. Davening is about taking time every day to focus on the relationship with Hashem. Now we're going to go back to something that we spoke about in chapter 1. For those of you who were here, if anyone was here, chapter 1, you were there, okay? That's it. You're the veteran, you're the...
Retain nothing there.
So we brought down, in the chapter 1, we brought down the interesting interaction between Rabbi and his student Abaya. The Rabbi once told Abaya, so they state in the Gemara, it says in the Gemara, the Rabbi once told Abaya, Kegoy nano beinini. You want to know what a beinini is? Look at me, I'm a beinini. To which, it's a Gemara in Brachas, to which Abaya vehemently objected. Abaya was a student of Rabbi. And he basically told him, if you're a beinini, then what are we? Where does that leave the rest of us? If you're a beinini, you're the Rabbi Bar Nachmani, as we know, as the Gemara says, right? He never stopped learning Torah to the point that the Malach HaMavos had to make whole tricks in order to. Bab Metzia talks about it, how he had to make whole tricks in order to bring him up to Bezdin Shal Maila, because he never stopped learning Torah. So if Rabbi Bar Nachmani is a beinini, what's everyone else? So while it's an interesting interaction, but it's something which we need to understand, because we know that anava, humility doesn't mean that one is in denial about one's true state. So why was Rabbi? Obviously Rabbi was a tzaddik. So what was he thinking? So if we're going to say, let's go back to Perek Aleph Tanya. If we say a tzaddik is someone who has never sinned, and a beinini is the half and half, the usual definition of a tzaddik, beinini, and rasha, so then it makes zero sense that Rabbi should think that he's half and half. He was so delusional. Everyone else knew that, and he didn't know. But now we're seeing something else. Now we're seeing already that the difference in a beinini and a tzaddik is more subtle. The difference is that a tzaddik is someone, they're both perfect people in terms of machshava dibur ma'aseh, in terms of the way they behave. The difference is that the tzaddik is someone who doesn't struggle. But what do we see already here? We see that by the beinini also, so there are different levels of beinini. We have one level of beinini, the simple level, who's taki, he struggles all the time. And then we just discussed another level of beinini, Misha B'Seiras Hashem Cheftzei, the one who loves studying Torah, and he studies Torah day and night. So he doesn't struggle. He's not struggling because he's too busy learning Torah all day to struggle. So maybe Rabbi thought that he was that beinini. Maybe he thought that I'm a beinini, and I don't struggle because I'm sitting and learning Torah all day. Does that work? That also doesn't work. Why doesn't that work?
When he stops learning Torah,
But he didn't stop learning Torah. He didn't. He never. That was the whole point of Rabbi. But
if he would stop, then he's vulnerable.
So that's what he was saying. Maybe that's what he was saying.
What he means that he's a beinini.
Well, the Rebbe doesn't accept that either. Why?
Why not?
Because the beinini who's busy learning Torah a whole day, he doesn't have struggle. So that's only one side of the equation. But the difference in the tzaddik and the beinini is not only in terms of one struggles and one doesn't struggle, but as we learned earlier on in Perek Tes, Perek Yud, another difference in the tzaddik and the beinini is that the tzaddik is walking around the whole day consumed with a love for Hashem, as opposed to the beinini. The beinini only has that love for Hashem only during davening. So once again, how could Rabbi have made the mistake? Rabbi knew that he's walking around the whole day with love for Hashem. So how could he have thought that he's a beinini? So that's what we're going to do inside. And Alter Rebbe is going to talk about a third level of beinini, which is the highest level in beinini. Yes?
Wait, it says that Abai was Abai or Rabba?
They were both involved. Which one are you talking about?
One who never stopped learning.
Rabba.
So Rabba never stopped learning, but as we said before, that may not carry over to constant love of Hashem, like davening.
Again?
We said that Rabba never stopped learning.
Right.
But the Baal Tanya says that davening, when you're davening, you are expressing directly a love of Hashem. But learning,
feeling it.
When you're learning Torah, it may not translate directly beyond the long term into love of Hashem. So it could be that Rabbi was saying, I learn Torah all day, but I don't have constant avos Hashem.
But that's not a fact. Rabbi, we have to believe that Rabbi, we're talking about Rabbi Bar Nachmani, he was a tzaddik. So how could he have made that mistake? In other words, we have to figure. In other words, the assumption is that he was a tzaddik. We have to figure out how is it possible that a tzaddik should be able to make a mistake and think he's a beinoni. And to understand that, Dr. Rebbe is going to say there's the highest level of beinoni possible, and let's do this inside 3 lines from the top of page Yutas.
He didn't learn the Tanya.
Rabbi.
Yeah.
And therefore,
that's why he came to this misconception.
Rabbi didn't have to learn Tanya to know.
The Tanya had to learn what Rabbi already learned.
And therefore Rabbi considered himself as a beinoni. Even though he never studied, he never stopped studying Torah. His mouth never stopped studying Torah. And he definitely studied Torah, and he desired to learn Torah day and night, with desire and with a yearning, with shukah, and with a yearning and a heart that is thirsting for Hashem. Ahava Rabba, there's no question that Rabba was experiencing the entire day. Ahava Rabba, an incredible love for Hashem. Kibeshas Krishma tefillah, like by davening and like by Krishma. V'nid bebe'einav, he thought to himself that he was kibeinini amispalul kolayim. The highest level of beinini is a beinini who's on the level of tefillah all day. Ukemaimer Razal, as Chazal tell us, it says in the Gemara, I think it's a statement of Rabbi Shua ben Levi, halavai sheyispalul adam kolayim kuloi, that halavai, a person should daven all day long. What does that mean, a person? So, Pashit Alpi Nigla, what he was saying is that there's a concept called tfilas nedava, that a person can daven even though you daven 3 tfilas a day. Technically, Alpi Allah, I mean, it's not done today, but one can decide, I'm in the mood of davening now, I'm in the mood of having a conversation with Hashem, so you can sit down, you can say Shemana Esrei again. Okay, don't do that without learning the halacha as well and knowing how to do it. And you have to be moist of something. But technically, according to halacha, there's this concept exists. So that's what it means in Pashut Pshat. On a deeper level, halavai she'yisbalol adam kolayim kulay means halavai that a person should be on the level of tefillah all day.
So what about the Torah? How much Torah can I get to go?
Should be on the level of learning, of davening all day. In other words, that means that by a beinoni, during davening, his heart is always filled with love for Hashem. It's possible to have a person, and he's not a tzaddik, but the entire day he's on the level of like he's davening, which means, if you remember, this is a very subtle difference, and it's for us probably it's not so important to really get it unless someone here has some sort of suspicion that they're on that level. We can have a conversation further. But the difference between the tzaddik viraloi and the beinoni hamispal kol hayoim is that we mentioned earlier. By the tzaddik viraloi, the nefesh hamas was nisbatel, was actually nisbatel. By the beinoni, the nefesh hamas is sleeping. So what do you have? It's a behemoth, the nefesh hamas, right? So some animals, they sleep a few hours at night. And some animals, they hibernate for the whole winter, right? So also nefesh hamas, it's a reflection that sometimes you have an animal that sleeps only during davening. That's the one behemoth from one beinoni, and then you have a higher level of beinoni that he has his behemoth hibernates, but it's only asleep. Theoretically and potentially, he can always reawaken, even though the Rabba, that was what Rabba was thinking, that is a beinoni mismal kolayim. Which reminds me, talking about how there's the behemoth out there, and there's the behemoth within us. And as we know, that the whole world was created for Klal Yisrael, and everything is a reflection of what goes on within Klal Yisrael. So there's a machlokes between the Rambam and the Ravid, brought down in Hilchos Malachim. We know it says that the Pesukim, when Yeshaya and Perek Yud Aleph, when he talks about Mashiach and the era of Mashiach, so one of the most famous nevuas, one of the most famous prophecies, Vigar Ze'ev Keves, that the wolf will dwell together with the lamb and the snake and all the different and Aryek, what's the lashon that the lion will eat Yechal Tevan, the lion will eat straw just like cattle. Aryek Bakar Yechal Tevan. So the Rambam says that all this is metaphoric. It's figurative. It's not literally going to happen, because the Rambam argues when Mashiach comes, the nature of the world is not going to change. It's a topic all for itself, exactly all that whole sugya. And he says, therefore, that means that though the wild animals are a mashal and a metaphor for the wild animals, the goyim, the wild goyim, and when Mashiach comes, all the goyim will be tamed. All the non-Jews who persecute and harass us, they're compared to lions and wolves, they'll all be tamed. And the Ravid objects to this. And the Ravid says, how can you say so? In our parsha, in this week's parsha, in B'chukaysai, one of the brachas is, Vishpati chaya ra min haaretz, Hashem says, I'm going to remove all all bad animals from this world. In other words, there won't be any more chaya ra, there won't be any more wild animals, meaning they'll all be tamed. In other words, apparently what the Ravid is saying is that if you want to tell me that when Yeshaya is talking, so he's talking and he's talking Mishalom, he's talking in metaphor, that's fine. A Navi could talk in metaphor. But a Nevuah, which is said in the Chamisha Chumshei Torah and Teres Moshe, those are not metaphors. Everything that it says in the Chumash has to be taken literally. So we know that in Teres Achsidus we side with the Ravid on this. That when Mashiach comes, the nature of animals will change, and that the animals, there will be no such thing anymore as wild animals, and animals will all be tame. So the Rebbe in the Sikha talks about this, and the Rebbe says, why is that? The Rebbe says that this is a reflection of the animal within. That right now, the animal within, sometimes it's tame and sometimes it's wild. When Mashiach comes, all the animals within, in Klal Yisrael, and Atam Kriyam Adam will all be tamed. They'll be Gar Zev and Keves. They'll all be transformed to Kedusha. So therefore, the natural impact this will have on the world, because again, the world is a reflection of what goes on in Klal Yisrael, is that the animals will be tamed also. So here we're talking about the Beinani and the difference, the struggle the Beinani has, and we're now going to move on to talk about different topics slightly in this Perek. But the upshot of everything that we've learned until now is that it's very important, and I guess the Alter Rebbe, it really takes him a lot of time to say this. It's very important not to forget who you are. It's very important to realize if you're a Beinani, if you're the person who struggles, so embrace who you are, understand who you are. Don't ever be deluded into thinking that you're infallible or that you're perfect or put yourself in a compromising situation, because this is your Aveda, is the Aveda of struggle. And now we are going to turn the corner and we're going to talk about the Ahava of the Beinani during davening. We mentioned it several times that during davening the Beinani experiences this love for Hashem, and now we're going to analyze this love a little further. Inside, around 8 lines from the top of the page Yutas, where it says V'hine midas ahavazu. V'hine midas ahavazu ha'amura b'Beinani b'shas ha'tfilah. This ahava, which we've mentioned several times, that the Beinani, the struggler, experiences during davening, and it is accomplished through the fact that the Nefesh Elikis strengthens itself and overpowers the Nefesh Bahamis. Hine legabe madreges hatzadikim. This ava, in comparison to the madrega of tzadikim, oivdei Hashem be'emes la'amitoi, those who serve Hashem be'emes la'amitoi, with the ultimate truth, ein bechinas ahavazu nekras b'shem avedas emes klal. The ava of the Beinani, the love of the Beinani, is not called a true aveda whatsoever. In case the Beinani was somewhat feeling good about himself at his accomplishments, as the Alter Rebbe, you should know that in relationship to the tzaddik, your aveda is not an emes aveda whatsoever. Why? Because after davening, the ava goes away, it dissipates. Uksiv, and the pasuk says, Sfas emes, the language of emes tikein la'ad, lasts forever. The ad argia on something which is only momentary, argia maloshin rega, is loshin sheker, that's the language of falsehood. So here, let's talk a little about what emes means. What does emes mean? 2 plus 2 is emes, and 2 plus 2 equals 4 is emes, and 2 plus 2 equals 5 is not emes. That's on the most simple level. Emes is something which is true, and sheker is something which is false. But the Torah's understanding of emes is much deeper than something which is true or something which is false, versus something which is false. We all know that emes is comprised of the letters Aleph, Mem, and Taf. Aleph is the first letter of the Aleph base, and Taf is the last letter of the Aleph base, and Mem is right in the middle, which symbolizes the idea that emes is always true, and that's the key about emes. Emes is something. If it's only true in a certain time, or in a certain situation, or in a certain circumstance, that's not emes. Emes means something which always is. It can't be changed. In fact, there's a Mishnah in Masechtas Para that talks about Mayim Chaim. You know that for the Para Aduma, the Torah says that you have to have Mayim Chaim. So the Mishnah says Mayim HaMechazvim, false waters can't be used for Mayim Chaim. What's the definition of Mayim HaMechazvim, of false waters? So it says if there's a stream, and even if once every 7 years the stream dries up, that's already not good. It's not Mayim Chaim, it's not true water, that's Mayim HaMechazvim, that's false waters. Because something which is true has to always be. What's the connection between truth and nitzchias? Nitzchias means something which is eternal, right? What's the connection? What makes one thing last forever and another thing not last forever? For example, the fact that I am a human being and not a gorilla. I don't know if you're following the news these days.
I'm sitting sure. I'm sitting sure.
So the fact that I'm a human being, that's not subject to change. No matter what happens, as long as I exist, I am going to be a human being. A lot of other aspects about me that might change, but that's not going to change. That's emes. That's emes. What does that mean? It's who I am and it's what I am. It's not something which is due to other external factors. And if those factors exist, then it would be correct. If those factors are changed, then suddenly it would be incorrect. Whenever something changes based on circumstance or based on time, that means it isn't essentially there. It's only there because of that time or because of that situation. It isn't essentially that way. So even when it is there, it isn't essentially truly there. By way of example, we know that it says that we say that who is emes? Hashem is emes. Hashem Elokim, emes. And the Rambam talks about this at length in Hilchos Yisodei HaTorah. What does it mean that Hashem is emes? That Hashem is emes? He doesn't say lies. No, that's not what it means that Hashem. That's not the chiddush that Hashem doesn't say lies. What does it mean that He's emes? So the Rambam explains. What does it mean that Hashem is emes? That means Hashem is the only entity that truly exists. And why is that? Because He essentially exists, not due to any external factor. Nothing caused Him to exist, and nothing can therefore cause it to change that existence. Everything else only exists because of Hashem. So does this table truly exist?
No.
There was a time when it didn't exist, and if Hashem decided now it's not going to exist, it won't exist anymore. So therefore, even when it's existing, it's a dependent existence. It's dependent on Hashem. It doesn't essentially exist. It's a dependent existence. That's not a true existence. That's not emes. Emes is something which is always. The tzaddik's avodah of Hashem is emes. Whereas Dr. Rebbe says over here is emes lamita. Meaning what? The tzaddik's love for Hashem is unchanging. No ebbs and no flows. It's not during davening, yes, and then after davening it disappears. It's part of who he is. His love for Hashem has become him. It's part of his condition. It's his emes. The Beinini, on the other hand, The Ava is there during davening, and after davening, the Ava is gone. What does that tell you about the Ava? It's not emes. Not emes. Emes is something which doesn't go away. Obviously, there's some sort of external factor that's involved over here that's causing it to be during davening, and not during davening, because that factor isn't there. Whether it's the hispoinus, the meditation, the greatness of Hashem, the focus, and after davening, it's not there anymore. So the love goes away. So therefore, the Alter Rebbe tells the Beinini, you should know that your love for Hashem that you experience during davening, relative to the avodah of a tzaddik, the avodah of a tzaddik, which is emes lamitay. Emes lamitay means it's constant. But again, why is it constant? Because it's who he is, and therefore it can't change. Just like I'm a human being, and that's not subject to change. The tzaddik's avat Hashem is the same thing. It's not subject to change. It's part of who he is. And you, the Beinini, it's not that way. No. Are you guys outraged? Alter Rebbe is telling you over here that your experience during davening and the feelings you have for Hashem during davening is not emes. Actually, he doesn't say those words. He doesn't say it's not emes. The words he says is relative to the avodah of a tzaddik. Relative to the avodah of a tzaddik, it's not nekras b'shem avodas emes klal. It's not considered emes whatsoever. And still, that is relative to the tzaddik. But relative to the Beinini, who he is, nikras avodah tama be'emes la'amitay shalahem. It's considered a avodah tama, which means a complete avodah, meaning nothing more is expected of you, because that's the best that you can do, considering that you, in as much that you're a Beinini. And it's your emes. It's the emes of the Beinini. And soon in the Peirik, we're going to see how there are different levels of emes. So relative to the avodah of the tzaddik, it's not emes at all. But however, if you're on the level of a Beinini, he's saying two things. Number one, it's an avodah tama. It's a complete avodah. It's a fine avodah. That's all that's expected of you. Tzemach Tzedek points out that the words avodah tama also come from, is in the Gemara. I think I'm but I might be wrong on that. Avodah tama, and over there, the context in the Gemara of the words avodah tama means it's the concluding avodah. Lashon tam v'nishlam. So avodah tama can mean a complete avodah, but it's also that's the ultimate that the Beinini can reach at. That's the end of his avodah, so to say. And it's emes la'amitei shalahem. Ish, every person, kfi madregasi, every Beinini according to his level, but madregas ha-Beininim. Says the Alter Rebbe, v'hareini koira ba'avasam shepit filasam gamken. I also call the ava that they experience in their tefillah. Now, here's a new thing. Till now we said avodah tama, and it's your emes. It's their emes according to their level. Now the Alter Rebbe adds, v'hareini koira, and I consider ba'avasam shepit filasam, the love they experience during davening gamken, sfas emes tikoin la'ad. I call this also the language of emes which lasts forever. Hoyil, because, and I'm going to get to the because, the Alter Rebbe is going to explain why. Not only is it avodah tama, and not only is it emes la'amitoi shalahem, but it's taka also sfas emes, it's also truth. And Alter Rebbe will explain why the Beinini is also truth. Even though it's not on this level of truth of the tzaddik, but it's also truth. But what strikes me about this line in Tanya, which we just read, I want to ask you guys, look at the line. Tell me, what is unique and interesting about the line of Tanya we just read? V'hareini koire ba'avasam shebitfilasam gamkein sfas emes tikin la'ad. Lasts forever. What? V'hareini. What's interesting about V'hareini? I don't know if there's anywhere else in Tanya where you have the Alter Rebbe referring to himself. Alter Rebbe doesn't say, you should know it's also emes V'hareini koira. I am considering it. I am calling it. It's like the Alter Rebbe is taking and saying, okay, guys, all you people who struggle and all you people who daven, and you're worried that your davening isn't emes because after your davening you go and you have your desires and your temptations, you're on my shoulders. I am telling you, I take it on my responsibility. Hareini koira. I am calling your avodah sfas emes tikin la'ad. This is also emes. It's fascinating how you don't find this elsewhere. The Alter Rebbe should refer to himself. And you think into it, what does the Alter Rebbe want from us? If I ask you, what is that? I'm not just talking about in this period, in general. What does the Alter Rebbe bring into this world? What's the avodah of Chabad? The avodah of Chabad is the Alter Rebbe says, he wants every one of his chassidim to use their Chabad, to use their mind, to meditate into the greatness, to think about and meditate about the greatness of Hashem, and thereby to develop midas, love for Hashem and fear for Hashem, specifically during davening. Because in Chabad there's this great emphasis on davening. And I can just imagine the chassid coming to the Alter Rebbe and saying, what do you want from me? You want me to think and sit and to learn some chassidus and to think about the greatness of Hashem, and then to daven, and then to experience this feeling of love for Hashem, and then an hour later, I'm in my office or wherever I am, the whole feeling is gone, it's all gone. My davening, it's like it was a dream, it's like it never happened, I'm in this world. What's the point of it? So Alter Rebbe tells us in this Perek, V'hareini koira, I'm telling you, it's on me. I'm telling you that your davening is true. It's not only is it your MS, it's absolutely 100% MS. Keep on doing and keep on going, and don't be discouraged by the fact that every single day you're going to come, you're going to daven, and every single day you're going to awaken a love for Hashem, and every single day you're going to go to work afterwards, and that love is going to go away. It's fine. Tomorrow you're going to come back to shul, you'll have it again, and that's your MS. Now, the Rebbe is going to tell us the MS of a Beinoni. There's two types of MS. There's a MS which is expressed in actuality, and there's an MS which is a potential MS. The MS of a tzaddik is the tzaddik which is the MS which is expressed in actuality, meaning the tzaddik is actually experiencing love at every single moment. Then there's the MS of the Beinoni. The MS of the Beinoni is that it's within his potential, within his ability, every day, during davening, maybe even afterwards, to take some time to think about the greatness of Hashem and to develop a love for Hashem. It's always there. And it's pointed out also that if you look, the word, if you were to talk about emes, related to the idea of tamid, tamid means something which is constant, something which is never ending. There are two kinds of tamid in the Torah. You have lechem hapanim, which it says about lechem hapanim, it has to be lefanai tamid, it has to be there always. There always has to be bread on the shulchan, to the extent that when they removed the bread on Shabbos, so you had one person sliding in from one side, and another person taking out from the other side, because they're always tamid. There always had to be bread on the lechem hapanim. That's one tamid. And then there's the carbon tamid. What does the carbon tamid mean? That it's brought every day, but not 24/7, but every morning, and that's also called tamid. Coming to shul every morning and davening and awakening that love for Hashem, that's the second kind of tamid. That's the second kind of emes. It's not the emes of the tzaddik. And yes, let's be honest about it. The tzaddik laughs at the emes of a Beinoni. Not literally, because the tzaddik has midas, has beautiful midas and love for every yid, but I'm saying it in theory or in concept at least. The emes of the Beinoni doesn't reach the toes of the emes of the tzaddik, but it's also emes. It's also emes. It's emes because it's always there, just beneath the surface, waiting to burst into fire. That love for Hashem. The fact that every single morning you go to shul and you can express it, what does that tell you? That tells you that it's always there in potential form. If you went to week 7,
you can have the same madriga of emes of the tzaddik.
it's not,
potential.
no, but
Potential
potential is not the same madriga as actuality.
So what is the potential you're talking about?
The potential for Avas Hashem, but it's only in potential, so it's not the same level of emes. In other words, let's put it in somewhat different words. Let's say a person went to shul 30 days a month, and of those 30 days, 13 days he was able to awaken a love for Hashem, and the other 17 days, despite him working very hard and being misbeinen, he can't. So then that's taka. That's not even emes on the lower level. The fact that the person is able to, and the Alter Rebbe says every one of us could. Some person it'll take 2 minutes of thinking about the greatness of Hashem, and some person that'll take an hour of thinking the greatness of Hashem. As the Alter Rebbe will say in a moment, that every person that makes a hachana to davening according to their madrega that they are. A person with a more edel neshama, it takes shorter. A person with a more grub neshama, with a more coarser neshama, it takes longer. But there's no such thing as a person who during davening can't awaken a love for Hashem. And the fact that it's always there, just beneath the surface and potential, means that it's also emes. So the one place in Tanya without the Rebbe is, so to say, pleading with us and saying, I'm telling you, trust me on this one. Hareini kaira, I'm telling you, this is also emes, is mamish related to the very nekuda that the Alter Rebbe was trying to tell us. And this is really the avodah of Chabad, of making sure that every single day, that during davening, to awaken our love for Hashem. And Alter Rebbe says, don't underestimate that. Don't think that because it's gone an hour later, it means nothing. It's emes. It's emes. And even an hour later, when you have all those temptations, it's still there just beneath the surface, your ava, waiting to burst out in flame once again tomorrow morning, or by mincha, or by ma'ariv, whenever it is, when you're davening again. Let's do inside. Hoyel. Why is it that it's emes? Hoyel, because ubekoyach nafshem alikis, it is within the ability of the nefesh alikis, lachzer le'eder bechinas avazul le'elam, at any point in time, to reawaken this love. Biskabrusa b'shasat tefillah, when it overpowers the nefesh bahamis during davening, midiyim biyim, every single day, aydei hachana ru'ya l'chol nefesh, through an appropriate preparation. Kfi erko madregasa, every person according to the person's own ability and his own madrega.
How do you determine someone's potential here? Not everybody has the same potential. And how do you determine how far you can go with your potential? And what would you consider absolute emes as opposed to non-absolute emes? How do you gauge yourself?
One question at a time.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No. Something to be sorry about. I think you're asking two different questions. Your first question is, how do you gauge yourself?
Yeah, how do you know
where your potential is? Meaning, be a little more specific. To know whether your potential is to be a Beinoni or to be a tzaddik?
But there's different madrigas with Beinoni.
Right.
So how do you know?
You keep on going until you hit a brick wall. And that's and for many people that happens. In other words, the difference between a tzaddik and a Beinoni is they both do avodah. The Beinoni hits a certain place and he starts spinning his wheels, and the tzaddik keeps on going.
Say it again.
I said the Beinoni and the tzaddik.
The tzaddik accomplished his goals. Yes.
The Beinoni and tzaddik both work. They both fight the nefesh bahamis. At a certain point, the Beinoni stops. In other words, there's a certain point where he can't go further. He cannot completely defeat his nefesh bahamis. The tzaddik keeps on moving. So how do you know if you can be a tzaddik? Keep on fighting and see how far you go. In nefesh bahamis. That was your first question. What was your second question? Okay, we still have a little discussion over here, a little more depth in the concept of what MS is and how it is. We can say, the famous joke, might have said it before, that a guy comes to the Rav complaining about his wife. We said this before. Okay, say it again anyways. Complaining how terrible she is and how inconsiderate and insensitive and mean. And the Rav is listening and is nodding. You're right. Anyways, 10 minutes later, in comes the guy's wife, and she comes over to the Rav and talks about how her husband's a lazy, good for nothing, and all the bad things about her husband. The Rav is, hey, you're right. Right? And then after the lady leaves, so the wife, the Rebbetzin, comes over to the husband, says, I don't get what just happened. Wife, husband was there telling him he's right. Wife came and you said that she's right. How can they both be right? The Rav says, you're right.
She's right.
So there's one MS, and there's another MS, and the third MS. So we have to figure out, what do you mean? How is it possible there's one MS of a tzaddik, and one MS? How many truths are there, buddy? So that's what we're going to talk about next week. We're going to talk about the versatility, either next week or maybe the week after, because next week we might do a Shavuos class. I'll see if it connects or not. We'll learn about the versatility of MS and why it isn't a contradiction to say that there's one emes and another emes,
You can answer
and the
what is-
funniest thing is that relative to one level of emes, the other one isn't emes at all. But relative to its own level, it is emes. So that's what we're going to learn about as we continue Mitzvah
What
Shem.
would be more right than